Hey everyone, it's Joe Lyons here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and Jackie here from Copenhagen, Denmark.
And welcome to the new year. Yay!
Yay!
It's been a
2020.
while.
Wow.
Yeah, we took a little break from our calls because both Thanksgiving and Christmas, well no, sorry, not Thanksgiving, but Christmas and New Year's were on our normal Tuesdays. And I knew with the holidays and stuff, even though we're off of work, it's just gets hectic with all the family stuff. So Jackie sounds like he had a good time with his family and friends, and I've been working on our rental, so that's not quite the same break. But anyway, we were just discussing, and Jackie has a program that he runs pretty recently, and why don't you go ahead and bring up what you had just mentioned, Jackie, and then we can start talking about it.
Yeah, the thing I was mentioning was I had this Excel or XML file that holds a lot of image resources converted to 64-bit encoding. So it's a nice way of sending people image resources without them being a lot of different files. It
distributing, is that what you're trying to say?
Exactly. Yep. I was trying to say
cool.
Distributing. And to me, it's nice, but now I'm at a point where I need to update some of these image resources. And to me, I could, of course, go into the file, pick the exact ones that I need to update, take them out, look at what they are by converting the 64-bit back into an image, and then changing it, making a new version of the image, and then converting that back to 64-bit, putting it in the XML file, and then trying it together with the script and seeing if it worked. But to me, I was kind of contemplating if I wanted to make like a GUI, an AutoHotkey GUI that was able to just parse all of this XML file and all of the different image resources that's in it and display them one at a time or in a grid or something else, and having the functionality of deciding an image, swapping it out with a similar image, and having the script simply doing the 64-bit conversion for me or encoding. And it's simple enough, but I'm like, is it really gonna be a time saver? Am I gonna save enough time by making a script and a GUI and building the functionality in a visual way compared to just doing it manually or making one that does parts of it behind the scenes? I'm not really sure, but because it's visual resources, I'm kind of like, it's probably gonna be worth it. But yeah,
I think I think that's a really important distinction, because the first thing what I was thinking about was the general question is, at what point should you build an additional tool to help you should you automate it more, of the tool that you're doing, right? At what point do you say, you know what, this is kind of painful and I do it every time, and hey, I can build another kind of tool, whether it's a GUI or whatnot, to speed up this process, right? And I think actually your point about being a GUI, the things that you're actually working on is part of that formula to decide whether you should or shouldn't, right? And the other one, so I was, like I said, I was working on my rental I was trying to decide if I wanted to convert the garage into another bedroom bathroom or not, and it's going to cost me about $5,000 to do this, and I think I can get like another $150 or $200 a month's rent. And so I was like, well, how do I decide whether I should do this or not? And I'm like, well, as long as I'm getting, let's say it's $100 a month, at some point I'm going to break the amount it costs me to convert it, and everything after that is extra money, right? So it's not like a really complicated formula. It's like, just when is that break-even point? And this is really the same thing, right? How much time are you going to save? And also another important one is, well, either frequent are you doing it, and how long do you, is it something that's going to go away in 2 months and it takes you, X time? Maybe it's easier just to get it done manually. But how, and of course the third one is, how long is it going to take you to actually write the code to create the tool itself, right? And I know from Jackie's use of GUIs, he's much more fluent to them than I am, so it's probably a no-brainer for him, right, to say, yeah, you know what, I can make a tool, right, it'll save me time. But I think it's a really good point distinction is, in this particular thing, you're comparing visual things, and that's where having a GUI help you with that does really, because you're going to use some sort of a program, right, to open and usually look at them to make sure. And even then, you're like, well, did I get the right one? Because I've done it before. I've had people, and I know they'll write me like, hey, you uploaded an older version of the webinar, right? When I was selecting files, and I didn't actually double click and play the video. I just looked at the thing and clicked it, and I got the wrong one. Whereas if I actually had a preview window, I would have seen right then, like, that, hey, that's the wrong. It says February and it's January, right, or whatever.
Yeah, and to me that's almost the same thing. At least it's very close to it, and I know that it's something that will come back maybe once a month. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, I might not do it even once in between. So I have all the code, I have all the functions that I can easily run to convert the 64-bit into an image. I can easily display that in a GUI. And I can also easily convert a new resource into 64-bit and then just swap those out in the XML file. But is it still gonna be that much nicer to visualize it and to clump it a bit more together, so that I don't need to familiarize myself each month with those small functions that I've made to do those tasks?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm like, maybe it's going to be worth whatever hours or whatever I'm going to be using on making all of that into a one thing, or am I just better off using those few minutes each month on? So, and that's where I'm at, right? It's I might use, let's say, half an hour on familiarizing myself with the whole process each month. And I might use a few hours on creating a tool that will make it a lot easier each month. And I'm pretty sure I'll be doing it for all of the months this year. So that's 12 months. So that's 6 hours.
Yeah.
It's close.
And let's not forget the next one, which doesn't apply with my example for the bedroom and stuff conversion, because it's a one-time thing. But for you have either the possibility you might actually reuse the exact same thing in another project, right? Of like, oh, you know what, I or have something similar enough where you can borrow from it, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those, just because you do it once, it's for this, but that doesn't mean you may not use that again for something else later, right? And it's a great thing about scripting, right? It's now in your library or in your head or your skill set. And so it's oftentimes, every time I've ever thought, no, I'll never do this, and I always kick myself later when I realize, like, I should have done that in the first place, because, after, maybe it takes a year or more, but later you realize, like, you know what? Yeah, it's worth it. It just is. It just takes a little longer for the payout, but it's there.
Yeah. I'm like, I need to code some other stuff as well. So if I make the GUI, I'm using time on coding that instead of coding whatever other functionality I could be coding. And that's why I'm making the comparison of how long am I actually using each month on doing this. Because taking those 3 hours or whatever, making everything, testing it, making sure it works, would probably be giving out, be removing some kind of hassle each month for myself, and thereby actually freeing up whatever mental capacity or whatever you would call that, to be working on something better after actually getting it done, because then I can just be like, now that works.
Now this, unless there's something else you think exactly tied to this, what I was just thinking is it's somewhat related. Is at what point do you, like, you have something every month, you go back and you're doing this, or maybe it's twice, whatever frequency, right? Do you ever stop looking at what you've done before and say, oh, I'm not going to mess with the code at all? Or do you always look at it and go, hey, is there something I can optimize here and change? Do you finally just say what's good is there is good enough and I'm not going to bother to look at it? It works solid. I mean, I think I definitely do, but it is sure isn't right away, right? Depending on the complexity of what I'm doing. At some point I get there, but it usually takes a while before I'm done entirely with something like that.
It really depends on if it's something I'm making from someone else that I'm not really using myself. If I have a good amount of those at work where a colleague of mine is logging into a website, getting something out, making some changes, and formatting an Excel file with some of the data. And by using COM and different parts of that, the code is steady. It simply just works. And oh, they added a new column or new information, and I changed that, but I don't really read over all of my old code to see if I can optimize something or tweak it. But if it was on my own system and I was looking and running it as a script file, so as an AHK file, I tend to do it more. I do tweak and find small pieces that, and for me, it's part of actually doing the job, whatever it is that I'm doing with it. That makes that task more interesting because I can optimize some code that's doing the task. That's the best way I can put it. So I might be using a little bit more than I would need because I've already automated the task. But the task came up. Let me look at the script I made to do the task. And just by doing that, I'll be using a bit of time on optimizing the script even more. And then because I had the script, I can easily finish it and still save time on the task compared to someone else doing the task. But I didn't just do the task in 30 seconds.
Right.
I did use a little time on trying to tweak the code or whatever, looking it over.
Which is part. So, and I think it's a very important thing to remember is it. I'm very similar to you. And I think it's a great distinction to say: is it something you did for someone else versus something that's yours? Because if I've done something for someone else and they're happy with it, boy, it's going to take a lot for me to actually look at it again, right? I'm like, unless the world changed and I learned some whole new approach that really is more reliable and consistent, okay, I might look at it. But generally speaking, and even a lot of my own stuff, I'm like, it works fine, right? I don't care. But it's more about, with what you were describing in the beginning was, I had this really long thing that I do, and right now it's not all automated. I've automated parts of it. In later, I'll start, either even bringing them from different scripts. I've done that where I'm like, I do this script, and then I do this script, and I didn't tie them in between. And I'll work on saying, hey, I can figure out a way to make them in one thing, right? And that's fine. I had another point there. I forget what it was, but yeah, that's a big point. If it's not yours, the other one is how pressed for time are you at that point in time, right?
Yeah.
Is if I'm super busy, I don't bother looking. I just say, you know what, it's fine. Next, move on.
Yeah, and depending on the complexity, if I'm doing, find this file, move it over here, do that there, select something here. And if I'm running either multiple functionalities within the same script or multiple scripts to do the entire thing, if the task is just a bit complex to do that way, I will at some point with all of this tweaking build a GUI for it, just because I can put them in a file, and I can click F1, and then when it's the next thing, F2, and then at some point I make a GUI, and I kind of put them in order, so to speak, and make it easy for myself to do all of what needs to be done up front, and then end it with an OK click or whatever, and then everything is just done. It's a process, but I do love actually making a GUI for myself, and that's probably also why my colleagues and stuff still come back and ask for this. Sometimes it's smaller stuff, but just because it's something they can pull up and, oh yeah, I need to select 2 files. That's right. And then I click on that merge or whatever button it is. Yeah. And it's fairly simple because at the beginning, I needed to make instructions for my users. And now with a fairly simple GUI, I've even seen them making instructions for themselves. Oh, I need to select this type of file here. And like, we can put that in the GUI or in the file. No, it's fine. Okay. But yeah. So GUIs do make a lot of sense when.
Yeah, and I think your main point there is it's one of the of course, when you first start playing with GUIs, programming wise, they're so confusing because you can really start anywhere. But the GUI can help, which we have a whole webinar on when you should create a GUI, right? Mm-hmm. And part of it though was to give structure and to prevent people from breaking things that they shouldn't even be doing in the first place, right? So you can force them to do it a certain way and help. You're like, here's part 1, here's part 2, here's part 3. It definitely helps make sure that they're doing it properly or correctly.
Yeah, because at least when I started, I did exactly as you said. You have this entire process, and this part here is easily automatable. This part here is easily automatable, and that part here is easily automatable. Mm-hmm. And I'll write first the first part, and then the next part, and then the last part. And there will be kind of separate entities, so to speak. So I either need to run them by hotkey or start them separately, one after another. Doesn't take much time. I have a chance to kind of QI or whatever you'd say, quality assess the stuff that the first part did, and so on and so forth. But when I tried to share these kind of scripts with a colleague or others, they didn't understand why I was using F1 and F2 and F3, or why they needed to press K, or why they needed to type a hot string at some point, or it's harder for me to pass on the process, and that's where it became quite obvious that a very simple GUI can often do quite a lot for that. So, and I'm like, as I started saying, just the aspect of coming back to it after a bit of time. Mm-hmm. If I took the time to create a small GUI, I would save even myself some time, just because 30 days is enough for you to forget those small things that you need to keep in mind. The last few things you found out just before it worked, or whatever it might be. Yeah.
I had that web scraping project. It ended. It went a year, and I made a lot of money doing it. And but I did it once monthly, right? Every month I had to go and run this stuff and do this stuff. And it was just far enough apart where I had to make videos to remind myself how to do everything, because it was complex. I automated a lot of it, but not all of it. And anyway, so I would make videos reminding myself, this is the process. Here's where you go. Because it's just once a month. It's just not for me frequent enough to remember how to what to do.
Yeah, I get that, because there is a lot of stuff to actually do, and work, life, family, whatever. If you have just enough to actually fill up almost every day. It's hard to keep track of it for a month. I'm pretty good at it, but I that's just how it is.
Yeah. And the other thing with videos and a GUI, right, is videos in particular, I found because I would to do the same thing like in a even just cheat sheet notes or a PowerPoint deck of like here's what you have to do. Trying to type clear directions would take me way too long. Versus in a couple of minutes, I can record with audio and demonstrate in the video what to do, and I know exactly next time, no questions asked, because I can pause it, rewind it. Like video is amazing for that.
Yeah, and it comes back to that old saying of images says 1,000 words or whatever it is, and video is just a media that does that. With whatever audio instruction you give to yourself or to others, it just works really well. Doing video instructions of small processes or small things that people need to learn, or reminding yourself, or teaching others, or I remember when I took a small course at work where we are also using video quite a lot, but the only thing that stuck with me was it was this external company that's trying to sell a product, right? But they said that the percentages of how well it hit the audience and stuff like that was in the 90s or something. I was like, okay, your numbers are perhaps a bit too high, but still, they were trying to sell something. The only other thing that I know, and also one of the reasons we had called these podcasts, is that video is actively consumed. Right? It's hard for you to do what you did with a written instruction, where you might have a step-by-step guide in front of you. You can take it at your own pace, whereas in a video instruction, pausing and playing, even it can work, of course it can, but it doesn't always feel the same. Whereas if it was plain audio, you could of course consume it passively. Audio you don't usually use your ears for doing whatever task you're doing. If you're shopping or if you're working, your ears is kind of a free resource where you can get input without stopping what are you doing. Where video, you kind of need to stop what you're doing to watch it and listen to it and understand it. But yeah, video is still, it is, to me, one of the best ways of doing stuff like that. That's for sure.
Cool. Well, awesome. Well, good,
yeah.
Good chat, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah. Bye, Joe.
Bye.